Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to EuroNurse, coming to you live from Florida. Yes, we're doing it remote today, so welcome to the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook Live, or X, or Instagram, welcome to the show, too. Be sure to keep hitting that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Also, if this is your first time watching the show, be sure to check out our website at euronurse.com, where you can learn more about the show. It's the best place to go to learn everything about the show, including all of our past episodes are available, all 77 of those. Also, it's the best place to go for our audio podcast. You can go to our EuroNurse Plus area and get your podcast anywhere you want for the car. And let's go ahead and bring in our experts right now. Experts, welcome to the show. How's everybody doing today?
Good, thanks.
All right. So as I said, I'm in bright, sunny Florida, but I will complain a little bit because the internet's not as good here in Florida. I must have to travel further or something. I don't know. So if you lose me, guys, sorry about that, but we'll do our best. Worst case scenario, if we really lose the signal, you will. I'll re-record the slide portion of it because I'm giving the presentation today. But let's go ahead and have you guys give your introduction. Lori, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lori Atkinson. I'm a certified urology registered nurse. I have been in urology for 25 years, and currently I am at a urology practice in Geneva and Winfield, Illinois. And not like Vic, in here in St. Charles, Illinois, I haven't seen any sun in the past week, and I need some vitamin D. So
exactly. Andrea, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Andrea Strong. I am a nurse practitioner in urology. I've been working in urology since 2010. I was a nurse for a long time. I did inpatient, outpatient. I'm also certified as a urology registered nurse. I'm on the Chicago Metro Board, one of the educational directors, and I am also on the National Board of Directors for SUNA. And I'm up in Wisconsin. It's cold and rainy and dark.
Yes, if you're not in Florida, you get a lot of that cold, rainy, and dark back in our home area of Chicago and Wisconsin. And who knows, John's not joining us today because I know he's going somewhere else and being remote, but maybe he's got better weather. So I'm the presenter and I'm the host of the show. My name is Vic Senese, been involved in urology for the past 40 years, and this is my way of paying it back. I'm also today's presenter, so I'm going to get right onto the show and go into my presentation. Bear with me a little bit because I don't have my whole office here, so I'm going to have to try a few things out to make everything work. We'll see how it goes. And I should be on the screen, I hope, with my slides. All right. I do see that it's come up. All right, great. So today we're going to be talking about, will healthcare workers be replaced by AI? So I have talked about AI in the past. I've done 3 episodes on different things that you can go back and watch. But I thought this was a good time to revisit AI because it's just changing so fast, folks. And I thought this might be a good time to look at how it might how it might affect our jobs. So I talked about creating PowerPoint presentations using something called Midjourney and ChatGPT, but I've got some news, some updates. There's a whole bunch of programs out there now that have AI built in to create slides. And I got to tell you, they're pretty good. They're pretty nice. I'm going to show you one of those that I used here. It's called slidesgo.com. I liked it because it didn't cost me anything. So all I did was create 8 slides on will healthcare workers be replaced by AI? And I'm going to show you what it gave me. Now, I'm telling you, it did all this work based on that sentence that I just showed you. So it didn't like my sentence. It decided to kick it up a little notch here. So a little better sentence. It chose the slide that you're seeing right now. I didn't. An introduction slide. It created all that wordage that you see there. Not me. Those robots working on the bed. It did it all. Then it decided AI and diagnostics was a good idea. Probably not a bad idea. But look at the slides it put together and how it changed the look. But a very consistent theme. Another AI treatment planning. And another one in patient care. So really broke it down into subjects. I mean, if you're really trying to put something together that I think looks professional this is a quick way to get started. You can always go in here and tweak these slides too, so you can always improve them. Conclusion slide and your thanks slide, and I threw the free in there just as a reminder that some of these are actually free, and that's just like EuroNurse is free. It's always best if you don't have to pay anything for it, so it's worth trying out. Some of them have obviously paywalls that can give you more options. Now, I did want to talk about ChatGPT. I did mention that before in episode 32. If you want to go and dig deeper, check that episode out. But it keeps progressing, and there's some big changes that I thought are worth looking into. One of the changes that I'm really glad to announce is ChatGPT for your phone. There's an actual app on the App Store. Now, I'm an iPhone person, so I know the App Store. I'm guessing Android has it too. But anyway, you can put it right on your phone, and you might say, well, why would you want that on your phone? You could go to the website, but this is so easy. You just click it. Now, here's an example where I just used it recently. I wanted I like to cook, so I was going to make beef stew. Thought, well, let's try a different recipe. So I went and I got the beef stew recipe, asked ChatGPT, give me a beef stew recipe right on my phone. Gave me all these ingredients so I could go to the grocery store and make sure I had purchased everything that I needed to make that stew. And then when I got home, all the instructions, everything right on my phone, just zip right through and make that stew delicious. Now, one of the other things I find really interesting is ChatGPT can actually write code, computer code. So I'm a website designer. I've been doing that for a long time. I enjoy it. And I do everything in the language called HTML5. That's the latest designer language for websites. And I'm going to show you some of that, what that code looks like, because we're not used to seeing the code behind the scenes. But I asked ChatGPT to design or create a website, in a 3-page website in HTML5 called EuroNurse, a video podcasting site bringing weekly episodes on urology healthcare topics. Now, the more information I put in, the more it might have fine-tuned it, but that's what I did. And here's what it gave me, these 1, 2, and I've got the third one. So it created an index, that's your home page that people see, episode page, and then it created an About Us page, which I'll show you in a second. But that's what a website looks like if you saw the code behind it. Now, again, this is really meaningful for me because this is what I type in when I'm trying to design a website. And again, there's that third page, the About. Now I'm going to show you what this looks like, because all you have to do is take these pages and upload them to what's called a server for websites. And that's what I did. And here's what it looks like. It's a simple one, but it's really effective. I mean, this is a lot of handwork to try to code all this yourself. Get you a good starting point. It's got links that actually work. That's always nice. It's got the 3 different websites, home, episodes, and About Us. As we click them, it takes us to the different places. It even threw a YouTube link in there. So if I wanted the link to one of the YouTube channels that I created, I could have put that in there. It would have showed up. Put a footer on the bottom. I mean, this is really a good start for a website. And a lot of that work to try to code it by hand would have taken time, but it's able to do it. The next one I wanted to talk to you about is something called Midjourney. Midjourney, I've talked about, is artists for those that aren't artists. And it's really it's just had a recent update. I mean, by recent, like within the last week or two. So good of an update that I can hardly take myself away from it. I keep playing with it all, for designing stuff, because I'm not an artist, but I can certainly appreciate art and I like to design things. So that's where I went to created the episode 47, all the artwork you see there in that little thumbnail. Most of the thumbnails that you see are created using Midjourney, but it was the 5.0 version. And some big limitations have been improved on. And the scary part is this is just version 6. What's going to happen in 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. But anyway, I asked it to create a logo for me for the Urology Nurses Foundation, a talk we gave a while back. And this is what it gave me. And actually, that's kind of cool when you look at it. It looks like a tree, but if you look at it closer, maybe it looks like a kidney on its, kind of laying on its side. And those branches could almost look like the collecting systems. So it's kind of a neat thing. But the words that it came up with, it's total, garbage. I mean, it's just not even close to what you could use as a word. Not really a great design tool. So designers, keep your jobs, maybe. Now, version 6 comes along, and I did the same exact thing, Urology Nurses Foundation, but now Midjourney can recognize actual words, and we'll try to incorporate those into designs. This is where it becomes a designer. And I will say that, you can see some of the spelling's not right. Some of these may not be exactly what we wanted, but it's a starting point. Now with Midjourney, you can always say, do it again. So these are 4 more versions. I just told it I didn't like it, try it again. Now you can see it's getting a little closer. Some of the stuff is almost usable. So that's really what you're looking for, is to try to get something usable. And then I came across this one finally, which I think is kind of neat, for a logo, but I don't like where that foundation is. But these things, once you get to this point, it's pretty easy just to move that foundation up here where it'd be more logical. But really what I want you to look at is, as a designer, what do you want to come up with as ideas? And it's kind of did something with flowers surrounding the term. Urology, nurses, and foundations. It picked 3 different fonts. It picked the colors. None of this I put in there. You saw the words I put in. It did all that decision making for itself. And that's a designer. That's based on design elements. And this one can be used because it's not copyrighted by anybody. So really cool. Now you can actually customize that with adding little things like in Pixar style. So I threw that in, and this is what it gave me. Pixar style is at the kind of motion graphics, so you get those more comic-y looking. I love those looks. But hey, if I was creating a pin or a badge, that one on the top would be pretty cool. So again, here's another look at Urology Foundation, Nurses Foundation. Got all the spelling right, and really kind of a cool looking element that could be used as a logo for something. I even went crazy and said, can you do it in peanut style? I didn't know what I was going to get, but Charles Schultz, eat your heart out. I think it looks like peanuts to me. Now, as you know, in the start of January, I started a new podcast called the Euro Nurse Podcast. And I had to design a website. I'm a website builder, but I'm not exactly a great designer. So of course, 5.0 was still the one that was available. So I, saw what it could come up with, and finally came up with a couple of, I thought, decent looking stick figures. And this is what I was using for the website. Never was really happy with it. And again, I can build websites, but I'm not a design artist. So I thought, well, it just came out with the 6.0. Let's give old Midjourney a crack at it. So I did. And this is what it gave me, is some ideas. Again, I asked it for the Europatient podcast. Now, it went with the podcasting microphone. I never thought of that, but that's kind of a cool idea. We look on the picture on the top right, you'll see there's like a CAT scan behind it. The bottom right, you see like an EKG tracing. So it's trying to incorporate a little bit of urology. Some of the spelling is not quite right, but it's coming up with color elements. And actually, this is what I sort of used to then redesign the website's look. And if you see the europatient.com website, you'll see it's got more of this look to it. Again, not a designer, but these ideas of using the microphone I thought was kind of cool. I liked how it broke Europatient out into 2 different words, different fonts. The color, the difference between Europatient and podcast, really some neat ideas. These are design. This is what you would pay a designer a lot of money to come up with. And this is something that AI is doing for me now. So if you're a designer, change your, you might want to look at changing your career. I should say if you are a designer, if you're thinking about going into design work as a specialty, you may want to consider it, because I think these AI is going to give you a run for your money. But we are here to talk about healthcare workers. Are we going to be replaced by AI? And there's a lot of arguments to say yes and no. But I think I'm going to try to give you a little take on why I think this might be something to be aware of. So what's the drone got to do with AI? Well, it has a lot to do with me. I'm a drone pilot. I love to fly drones and really enjoy that as a hobby. Getting some great pictures with it. You can see everything as it's flying. So it's really kind of cool. But in 2020, I decided, maybe I'd like to become a commercial drone pilot. Yeah, it's really a thing. But you have to take a license exam, the FAA Part 107 exam. And I'll tell you that studying for that exam, it's the same written test that a pilot has to take to become a commercial pilot. Exactly the same. With additional stuff for the requirements to be a drone pilot, because there are some restrictions to where you can fly and certain things you have to get permission to do. But anyway, if you wanted to, and you say, well, what do you do as a commercial drone pilot? Well, I live in the country. farmers are using drones to look at their crops and see if the areas that might need watering or fertilizing. People that have had their houses damaged by hail, it doesn't hit one house, it hits a whole neighborhood. So the insurance companies want to pay somebody to go up and take these drone pictures of roofs to kind of see, do they really need to be replaced or not? I can't tell you how many different jobs you can get as a commercial drone pilot. There's quite a few. But it's, as I said, a hard test. So I decided I would go with all the other nerds and take a course in how to pass the test. So I did. I signed up for this all-day course with a bunch of fellow nerds and went to learn more about drones and what's involved. And lunch was on us. So a group of us walked over to the local fast food establishment and sat down, and we had our lunch together. And we were complaining about the service. Of course, it was terrible. But one of the guys happens to be a robotic engineer that was in our group. And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that." He says, "This is all going to be replaced in the near future." He says, "This is all going to go to robots." And I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "The only thing that's stopping that from happening is the cost of an employee." And he said that basically $15 was the ceiling that they were all looking at. He said, once we get to above $15 an hour for an employee working at a fast food restaurant, he says, you're going to see robotics start to take over those jobs. Well, what happened post-COVID? All those jobs now have gone to $15 and more an hour. What's happened to a lot of these restaurants? Kiosks and robotic cookers. So in the past, technology has been what I call assistive. It's helped us out. Our computer helps us to type things. It helps us to do things. All of this stuff is assisting us. But what we're talking about with AI is what I call disruptive technology. When something takes over your job, it's not just helping you, it's getting rid of you. And fast food, I think, is a definite industry that's going to go to the computers very quickly because they just are so good at doing this. So really, when you look at having a human employee versus a robot, well, like I said, the big thing was the cost. It was cheaper to hire people. But now the investment on robots makes it more of a better deal. And as wages go up, robots become cheaper. And robots don't call in sick. They don't get tired. They don't have a fight with their partner. They don't get injured. They don't ask for a raise. They don't complain. Any of you that have been in the management position, which is a position that I was doing before I went to semi-retirement, know all about what that's like when you have an employees calling in and having to deal with that. So robots, you don't have to worry about that. But of course, we always argue essence of human touch, empathy, and critical thinking in patient care cannot be easily replicated by machines, right? Or can they? Well, back when I first started in practice 40-some years ago, a busy day in our office was about 30 patients. And, you know, that's kind of an eight-hour, by the time you finish up with all your paperwork, 10-hour day some days, but 30 patients. Nowadays, 50 plus are being seen. So we're being, seeing more patients in the same time that we saw, 30, we're seeing almost double that now. So how much empathy, how much caring are we really able to give the patients when we're really just trying to get through the numbers? Well, let's talk about AI. So you think that one through for a while and let that percolate. What's so special about AI? Computers have been around. We write the code. The computers follow the code. AI is different. It uses something called neural networks. And if you're not familiar with what a neural network is, you got one in your head. It's called your brain. And basically, it's the way that you're able to think through things. We have all this information in our brains, and we make these connections between different information components, and we're able to quickly make decisions based on that. Well, AI computers can be trained the same way. They can have information and learn from it. And they use something called large language models. And if you've looked recently, like even that ChatGPT is a large language model. When I asked for a recipe in the old days, I would have gotten something like a referral to a web page with it. But this actually gave me, like I was talking to a human being, a broken out recipe with ingredients and instructions, just like generated human text would be. So they're really good at doing that. Actually, what's interesting is in my career, when I bought my first computer, it couldn't do anything. You had to write all the programming. And most of what computers did is you gave it a set of commands and it followed those. So if this, do this, if that, do that. Well, Google did this project called the Deep Mind using AI to teach robots to play soccer. So in the old days, you would have had to write code for every step along the way, pick up foot, push foot forward, exactly all that stuff. Well, they didn't do that. They just gave it a list of instructions and then gave it one command, which was kick the ball into the net. That's what it did. And it was able to then learn on its own how to play soccer. Google it, or you Google it, yeah. Check it out on YouTube. There's a picture of these two little computers, not those exact robots, but these two robots learning how to play soccer. And it's scary how good they get. Now, if you don't know who Geoffrey Hinton is, he's often referred to as the godfather of deep learning. And his pioneering work in the 80s and 90s is what helped to lead to this AI. Now, I'm going to encourage everybody to go on YouTube and look up Geoffrey Hinton 60-minute interview. It's about, 15 minutes, I think. It's 15 minutes that I think really is worth checking out and kind of listening. This is the guy who should know. He's one of the creators of AI. And to me, I'm fascinated by how it works and wanted to know more about it. So I listened to the interview. I'm going to give you some of his predictions. There's a lot going on right now where they're saying, hey, we better be careful about this AI stuff. It could be dangerous. Are we ready for it? Should there be some legislation to control it and stuff? And anyway, so here's some of his predictions and some of his information. He said that computers are going to learn by trial and error. Unlike the old days where you said, if this, do this, they followed a command line, they are able to have a list of things that they can learn to do and then pick from that, and they make these connections between what's working and what doesn't work. I always say it's kind of like when you have somebody learning as a kid, the difference between a hot stove and not a hot stove. You touch a hot stove, you burn your stuff. You don't touch a hot stove again. That's trial and error, right? AI are able to make decisions. They can actually decide not what they're programmed to do, but say, based on what I know, do this. He was asked in this interview, are they self-aware? Are they sentient beings almost like you and I? And he said, no, they're not. So he said, they're still computers. However, he was asked, do you think they'll ever become self-aware? And he thinks they probably will. He says they have the potential for that. Right now, he says they're almost as intelligent as human beings based on their current amount of memory. But he said, the way they think is different than the way we think. And he thinks that we're going to actually be producing a computer that's more intelligent than us. Now, here's the scary part of the whole interview. He was asked about how they work, and he said, we know what the code is that we wrote, but we don't understand how they're incorporating this code into do what they do. Now, that's a little scary. The people who actually wrote the code don't really understand how the computers are utilizing it. And computers are able to write their own code or rewrite their code. So the control factor, could they someday take over? Can you say Skynet? Well, surely all we have to do is unplug them, right? It should be a piece of cake. Computers act up, you disconnect the power, they go away. Well, that's true in the old days, but AI, remember I said they're going to be able to write their own code. And they'll be able to proliferate it over the internet. So they could have code everywhere. How are you going to figure out which computers to turn off? And maybe you'll be programmed not to turn them off. Social engineering is being used like crazy. All of the social networks are available to your computers. And they just have to convince some of us that it's better to leave them up to run things than we can. Well, that's sometimes not so hard to believe, is it? But social engineering can be utilized on us to make those decisions not to turn them off. So it's possible that if the computers become smarter than us and decide to take us out of the equation, they could almost engineer us to do that. So with that, I'm going to talk to you about, as I started out, healthcare. What are my predictions? Why do I think this affects healthcare? How can it affect healthcare? I think it's definitely worth talking about. We're all involved. A lot of this stuff is happening kind of like under the sea. You don't see it from the top, but it's happening, and it's happening in a sneaky way where you don't notice it. You just kind of get used to it. Some of this, I think, we're already getting used to, and some of it's assistive, some of it may be destructive. So we have to be careful. But one of the things that I've seen is a big change in how medicine is being run, and I think we can all probably agree on that. In the old days, doctors owned their own practices. They kind of ran everything. Most guys were pretty decent, most guys and girls. Most people are still at their heart, pretty reasonable people, and made decisions based on what would probably provide the best outcome for patients. We always talk about having good outcomes, but most practices these days are now being owned and run by investment people. They're investing in the practice of medicine because it's profitable. And the driving force is to do things more economically, and bottom line is to make more money. Everybody likes making money, right? But does that sometimes affect decisions? Well, if you look at it, what things would you do if you were trying to run a business and you had AI as a competitor? That's where I'm going to go. So now we kind of know where I'm headed. So let's take our receptionist who's there to greet the patients as they come in the door. Do we really need this person? Now, as an investment person, I'm going to say, can't I replace that person with some artificial intelligence? Of course you can replace that person. They're not necessary. Here's what I predict is going to happen. As a patient, I'm going to come into the office. Does anybody have a patient nowadays who doesn't have a cell phone? I haven't met that patient. We all have cell phones. They're almost like a second appendage. So they come in, they've got their cell phone. First thing they do is they check in on their cell phone that they're here. I do that, when I order fast food. You drive up and you click the button, I'm here, and they start making your food. Same thing. So you don't need a person anymore. You can check in on your phone. And you don't need a person to call you back to the room, because your phone can tell you that it's time to go back to the room. So certainly that person's gone. We don't need them to take your history, because you're going to put your history into the system well before that happens. We don't need them to take your insurance information. Actually, I just had to switch primary care physicians, and my wife had her appointment. A whole history and everything was already pre-filled out by her on the computer, and the copay was already paid for before she even got to the visit. You don't need a person. So certainly someone to bring you back to the room, I don't think so. All you're going to do is it's going to recognize from your phone that it's got this chip that's a near field communication. So it's going to say, that's you, open the door for you. And it's going to point to what room you should go into. The floors can be made to be illuminated so they can point out what room, and it'll know which room you need to go to. So you don't need someone to bring you back. So you're perfectly able to do all that without one single human intervention. Okay, so we talked about the history and the physical. Surely the nurse has got to do that, right? No, not really. Again, it's all taken care of online before your visit. You filled it all out. If there's a procedure that's going to go on, you probably signed your consent. You signed your HIPAA. All that stuff that typically involved a person does not need a person to do it, because AI can recognize it. And it can even, with the use of texting and stuff, if you're doing it wrong, it's going to say, no, I'm sorry, you missed this question. It's able to communicate with you in natural language. All right, so we get to the rooms. Surely the room's going to have somebody there to be there to change everything out and clean it and whatever. No, they don't need anybody there. It can all be done by robotics. Well, Vic, come on, you're crazy, right? Of course it can be done. So those lights you see above you, when the patient and the doctor leave the room, they turn on to UV. UV is a sterilizing light. Completely sterilizes the entire environment, so that you no longer have to worry about cleaning it. Anything that fell on the floor, well, we got those robots that are going to clean that up. What about that table? Well, who hasn't been to the airport where that little cover that goes over the toilet seat, after you get up, it switches itself? Why can't that happen to the table? It just changes itself. All that could be done. Well, how about the scope that I use, that cystoscope? Well, a lot of these are disposable nowadays, so there may be one-time use, and you're going to drop it into something, a recycle type bin that's going to take it back to be reprocessed. And if it's not a recyclable or one-time use item, it'll probably go into a system that can reprocess all the equipment without a person. It'll be able to clean it, sterilize it, and put it back in the room for use. So everything can be done without one intervention by a human being, except maybe the doctor who's there to do the procedure. So stick with your surgery. That's going to pay off in the long run. But certainly, what happens when you got to call in to make an appointment? What happens when you, excuse me, I need to get a drink. What happens if you need to get a medication refilled, or you have a problem? Who's going to be there to talk to you about that? Not them. I can guarantee you, they're almost all phased out now. I can remember when I had a bustling group of people sitting in our office that was their main job was answering phones. There's nobody in that spot anymore. They've actually repurposed the area. And all of this is going to what's called chatbots. We're all dealing with chatbots day in and day out nowadays. Very few customer service. It went on two ways. So the first thing they did is they farmed it out overseas because it was cheaper. So they found that was cheaper. But that was before AI. Now what they've done is they found that chatbots can ask these questions, respond back in human-like ways, even sometimes sound like a human being on a phone. A lot of it's done through text messaging, so you can't tell who it is, but they're very realistic, and they can do all that. They can certainly make your appointments. They can handle medication refills. They'll be able to do all the things that our person who is taking that information down physically as a human being was able to do. So they're gone. And we talked about this in a recent episode around the end of the year, where already AI is starting to replace some of the physician positions. So radiologists and pathologists are no longer going to be necessary, because things that can be read from a computer tend to have been found to be more accurately read through an AI system. And as that gets better, those positions are going to probably disappear. Maybe just one person to overlook and sign off on things. And even that won't last forever. And I just read an article today in a email that I got about a new program that just came out for looking at you load it into your phone, and if you've got a lesion on your skin, you scan it, and it can determine within a 97% accuracy as to whether this is something that needs to be checked or not. So dermatology even starting to get replaced. And, do we even need an office at all outside of procedures? The patients are really loving telemedicine, because you don't have to sit in an office and wait. You don't have the drive somewhere. We all kind of learned or got indoctrinated by COVID into being online. So we're already set up for this, and it's gotten to be done very well through telehealth. Patients like it. So, and you can diagnose a lot of things through the phone. Some people will say, well, you can't really palpitate patients, but let's be honest. Most of the stuff is being done by testing, and you can, a lot of your assistive devices like your watch and stuff can check temperatures and things in the future. So it's not that far away that you really don't need to come into an office. But do you need a human being, or can Dr. Google take care of you? Dr. Google, you say? I must be crazy. Well, Google's working on it, and it's something called Amy. They tested it. Amy is a AI-generated system called the Articulate Medical Intelligence Explorer. Oh, of course, they always got some fancy name. But here's what's interesting about this. It actually can outperform primary care physicians on multiple evaluations criteria by talking to patients. And the scary part, higher empathy rates. And Fox News did a thing on this that I had saw. So if you want to look it up for yourself, but I'll take you through the study a little bit. So it was a blinded study. And what it did is it compared AI to board certified primary care physicians who carried out text-based consultations. So, you're going back and forth with the text, chatbots on text, or a physician on text. And across 149 healthcare scenarios, using patient actors to play the part of the patient. So it wasn't real patients, but they were pretending to have these disorders. But neither group was told whether they were talking to or chatting with an AI or a real doctor. Now, you would think that we're so empathetic, they would certainly choose us as being better. So then the results were compared by specialist doctors on diagnostic accuracy. And the patient actors were the ones who then rated based on quality parameters such as politeness, feeling at ease, understanding, that empathy thing that surely can't be replaced by a chat bot. Well, here's the interesting part. They found out that the diagnosis provided by the AI, Amy, were more accurate and more complete than those provided by board certified doctors. Probably not a big surprise because they're able to ask the right questions and they have such a huge database, more than we can ever, remember or learn. So it achieved on 28 of the 32 measures, the AI had better results. And from perspectives of specialists that were overseeing these. All right. So here's the big one. And Amy, the AI, surpassed physicians in conversational quality, according to both the specialists and the patient actors. It scored better on 24 of 26 criteria that it scored. And the other two that it didn't do better, it was considered non-inferior. So it's as good as a real person. And for the most part, it's actually more empathetic than they are. So it takes its time. It can be programmed and can learn how to communicate and engineer answers with patients. So we're getting towards the end here. What happens now? This is the big question. I've kind of gone through an office scenario where we've eliminated almost everybody in the office, from the nurses to the receptionists to the doctors. Most of them probably aren't necessary. And as the driving force becomes the cost, and it's cheaper to use an AI, I think it might see some of that. My big question to everybody, and we'll get the conversation going. I get ready to throw stuff into the comments. I'll try to answer anything I can because a lot of this is my predictions. But what are we going to do with all these people who no longer have jobs? That's really going to be a big concern, because you've gone to, it won't probably concern me so much, but it's going to concern the next generation for sure. Because when they start getting replaced by robots, what are they going to do to make money to support themselves? Remember, I told you this is disruptive technology. So hasta la vista, baby. And with that, I'm going to switch us over here to our group here. All right. So now's your chance to put your questions into the comments area. We're glad to take any comments. But I'll go to my colleagues here and ask them what they thought. So Andrea, what's your thoughts?
Vic, I have a question. Is there anything that you don't know how to do? Just amazing, all the things that you've learned how to do. I love it.
Yeah.
It's very inspiring.
I don't like to just kind of stop doing things. I always find hobbies, and what can I say? Yep, I've actually flown a real plane too, so I know what that's like. But I don't have my real pilot's license. I started off with Microsoft Air Simulator, where you're pretending to fly a plane, and I often wondered how close that was to taking off or going into a real plane. So I went up my son is a pilot, and I went up in a Cessna with him. And I said, all right, let me see if I can fly this thing. He said, yeah, sure, go ahead. And I did, based on playing with a simulator. So, Lori.
That was certainly an interesting lecture. It's sad in a way.
Yeah.
Because where's your connection with other, like, human life, and what's going to happen to not only people's jobs, but their mentality?
Yeah.
So, I don't know how robot, I guess, could give a shot. So we might be okay for a little while, but boy, it's interesting, because that you're completely correct. And that's the way that it's probably going to turn.
Yeah.
Who'd ever think that we'd have a robot doing surgery?
Right.
That, like, when that came out, it was like, you mean the doctor's not even at the patient's bedside. They're in a little, a counsel that's doing a surgery with their hands in a robot. I mean, it's insane. So yeah, it made me think a lot. And yeah, part of me is sad, part of me is really interested, and it's kind of cool, but yeah, what's going to happen with all these people? Yeah,
Yeah.
Monica also agreed. She said less connection, more loneliness, possibly.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be a problem. And part of the issue is too is the next generation are being raised with these devices, and I'm right now I'm in Florida because my son's in Puerto Rico with his wife on a business meeting, so we came in to watch our 6 grandkids for the week. And when they're not actively talking to you, they're on their little devices and they're texting with their friends, and there's a lot of non-verbal communication going on these days.
Yeah, I think human connection is so important for health. And if we're not connecting with each other, we're just on devices. I think it can cause a lot of mental and physical health for the population. But, overall, this is a huge topic. A lot of pros, a lot of cons, still a lot of questions on what this is going to look like. But, in truth, we're using it already a lot in healthcare. One example is, the Dragon technology. This is where you basically speak your notes. So I do use that in my practice. I'm not a very fast typer, and I do have a lot of errors. So I like to use that Dragon technology where I can speak it, and it does a really great job of recognizing what I'm saying for documentation. But now they have a newer version. I'm curious to know if anyone's using this. It's called Dragon Ambient or DAX Pilot. You basically turn the Dragon or your app on in the room with the patient, and it will listen to your conversation and it will create a note for you. Yeah. And I actually have some statistics that they have up on this. So they're saying that it's 70% less time spent in clinical documentation, 85% better experience providing patient care, and a 90% improvement in documentation quality. So I think I haven't tried it yet. We're in the process of doing it, but it's interesting technology.
Yeah, you may have to fill us in on how that worked once you got your time, experience with it, to let us know how you think it. But it's to me, it's fascinating because this is the stuff that AI is able to do, unlike any other computer programming that we've seen in the past. And as you said, I've been involved in what haven't I been involved in? I bought the very first personal computer that ever existed, and I had to write all the code. It wouldn't do anything. It gave you a little slash mark, and then you had to start writing code, and then it would do stuff. But it's always been this equals that. It's always been a command line, and it would just follow the instructions. But now neural networks are just, we see them all the time, and it just happens. I was a perfect example. We were out on last time when I was here in Florida, we were out driving, and my wife said, "I'm hungry." She says, "I want to go and have something to eat." So I went on Siri while we're driving, and I said, "Hey, find the closest Texas Roadhouse," because I passed a bunch of them up, and we kind of like those. I said, "Find the closest Texas Roadhouse," and Siri goes, "There's a Texas Roadhouse 10 minutes away. Would you like me to call and make a reservation, or do you want directions?" Now, I mean, that's the next step. So it went from just strictly giving you directions or saying, a list of places. It was able to tell me which the closest one was, where it was, and then would call ahead so I could do that pre-reservation thing. I mean, that's just mind blowing.
Yeah. Now when you go to a restaurant, you do have a waitress, but yet you pay the bill at your table.
Yep.
So you don't even have to. Yeah, I see how a lot of that's kind of dweeding and going to the wayside. It's interesting and a little sad.
Yeah. You're right, because I think we're going to miss that but person-to-person interactions, because we don't. I'm a big one for always wanting to kind of talk with the waitress, and who you asking what their name is and things like that. You're just being personable, and you don't have that sometimes when you don't really see them. They come, they take your order, they disappear, somebody else delivers it, and as you say, you pay at the table. Your one interaction was giving them the order. Well, I could do that on a kiosk, really.
Yeah. And even kids when they're growing up, when we grew up, we're outside on bikes and what have you, and now they're on their whatever device they have. They have no interaction. Their social skills are terrible. I mean, you can see it even now.
Yeah.
That social skills with kids are not as good. It's not the priority. So
They're better with computers than we were, but they're not as good interacting with each other. So I think it's important. Unfortunately, the grandkids I'm with that are always on their devices are heavily in the sports. So they have a lot of time interacting with people one-on-one so that they're getting that type of, but I think you have to encourage it. You have to have something that they do besides play video games.
mm-hmm. For sure.
Sorry, I dropped out for a moment there. I feel
Yeah.
like it was the universe reminding us of the limitations of technology. My computer just died because I forgot to turn it in or plug it in rather.
Yep. I always think about that, when the computer says, "Are you sure you really want to do that?" I get that question from my wife all the time because a lot of times it'll say, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And she's like, "Wait a second, do I really do this or not?" Like, yeah, go ahead, just do it.
Yep.
But
I was just reading an article this morning about basically AI in healthcare. Apparently, about 1 in 4 cancers can be missed on a colonoscopy, and they can train AI to basically look at the pictures and say, "Hey, doc, take a better look at this area." And so the thought is that in the near future, it may be considered medical malpractice if you're not using AI technology during colonoscopies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
I do like the whole dermatology thing. It takes 3, 4, 5 months to get into a dermatologist and just to check a mole, and you can do it at home on whatever app or just to have it checked.
And the thing is, it's highly, it's like everything else. They look at specificity and sensitivity. It's very sensitive, but not as specific. So it had like a 97% sensitivity at detecting like a melanoma, but it would detect things that weren't melanoma. So it always aired on the wrong side. So they would send you to see a dermatologist, but still, that's not bad.
Yeah. Lawsuits would be interesting.
Yes.
If for whatever reason the AI did not detect it correctly and missed a cancer or something, then what?
Yeah. Right. Well, we know self-driving cars have had some issues too, where they have hit pedestrians and things because they started using them, and so then it's like, who's at fault? Is it the company, the car company that made it, or the person who should have really been paying attention behind the wheels? So
right.
But it's coming, folks. It's going to happen. Hopefully, not the scenario that I just described, but I do see a lot of jobs being replaced, and hopefully there'll be other things that people can get involved in that are going to, replace them. But I don't know. It does.
It's up to us on how we spend our time. If let's say we're in theory, in the future, we don't have all of these jobs that are available, but we still have problems that need fixing.
Yeah.
And so we need to get up and we need to solve the problems and get involved because, it's really up to us.
I think the argument has always been if we had more, more free time, typical Americans, we kill ourselves at work. We don't work 40 hours, we work 60 hours. It's just crazy life. And really, if you start taking some of that away and just start working more focused, you could be more productive and probably make something that would earn more money and still have free time to go out and ski or boat or do whatever things you like to do. So maybe it'll be more beneficial. Or maybe, did you see the movie WALL-E, where the machines are pushing everybody around in carts because we no longer do anything?
Right.
All right. Any comments from our group?
Not seeing any more comments.
All right. I think I scared them all. They're all like, "This is it.
That's the end of
I'm out of here. The world's changing too fast for me." But yeah, I think it's some of it's good. I think that, do we really need to have people checking patients in and wasting their time that, gets that bottleneck at that front desk as they're checking in and they're getting their insurance card scanned, when that can all be done from the house now. That's really where the phones have gotten so useful, because you just take a picture of your insurance cards, boom, it's got your insurance information. You go in there, and I like the idea. I think I'd like to see that, where you just come in, check in on your phone, I'm here, and then it tells you okay, and then when you walk up to the door, it opens because it recognizes it's you, not the wrong person, and then the floors light up and tell you where to go.
Yeah, I know a lot of labs, at least around by me, they don't have receptionists anymore. You walk in and they will come and get and bring you back.
They still bring you back, but
you check in not with a person. So
well, I think it's gonna be a longer time before we see the real skills that we have, giving injections, taking, drawing blood, performing surgeries, putting in a catheter. Those things are gonna,
Oh God, can you imagine?
I know, that's why I
being put in by wonder how men are gonna feel about that.
Please relax.
Yeah. Don't move. We have a couple of comments here. And so Reggie said, very good information about AI.
Oh, thanks, Raj.
Monica, seems like an important opportunity for education next generations to help lead students to seek human interaction.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be important for the next generation that's graduating and going into college to look at the careers that are going to be the best paying. I think it's not going to be going to college necessarily, but more trade school stuff. You still hard to get a robot to come and answer your problem when your plumbing doesn't work, or your electrician, when your electricity's not working. I think the hands-on skills are going to be more important than ever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the research shows that those blue zones, those are the areas that have the most people living over 100. They have a lot of social interaction. So there's, huge connection with health. And I think, Monica, there's a big opportunity to focus on that with ourselves and with our younger generations.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I had a nephew going into, he wanted to become a graphic artist. And I said, you may want to reconsider that. He did. Yeah. He looked into the stuff I told him, and he said, you're right, Uncle Vic. He says, I think it's not the right thing to go into.
Not everybody has an uncle like you, Vic.
Yeah.
Olive, I find it intriguing, but also scary. I agree that the human connection is important in healthcare. Hopefully they can have a hybrid AI assist in background healthcare work, like refills, prior authorizations, and have humans doing patient care, but that still will result in a lot of loss of jobs.
Yeah. That's a good point, Olive, too, especially like the drones of what we do for day to day, patients calling in for refills. And then at the end of the day, a lot of that could be automated.
Yeah.
Prior authorizations. Oh my God.
Oh God. Yes. I would love for that to go away.
Who's saying, please don't replace that part of my job?
Exactly.
It's absolutely take it. I don't want it. Yeah, that's definitely a part of the job that you don't mind giving up. So those things will just probably be the things that go first. The thing that scared me was that thing that Google did with Amy, and that's the where they looked at the compassion level of a chatbot and the ability. When you start hearing some of these artificial voices, I mean, they can get compassion in their voice, and they can spend all the time in the world with somebody where, we're more restricted. You're trying to spend time with patients, but you don't have the time to spend, right?
Yep.
Well, I should ask you guys that are on the call or that are watching this, how many patients per office day, are you seeing, out there? We'll start with our closest ones. Lori, how many patients per day do you typically have coming in for a physician?
We have two office per physician, probably about between 30 and 35.
So that's a reasonable.
It depends, but in a daytime we'll have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 providers in at one time, and then you're reaching that 100 point. So in a small office where it's literally just it's an assembly line, it seems like, and that's a little sad to say.
It is. It is.
Your goal is to just keep people moving, and you try to spend so much time with these people. There's people there that just want to talk, and you've got this you want to, as a nurse, that's what you're trained to do, but
Right.
you don't have the time to sit down and actually talk to people like you really want to. So
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's a definite. Andrea, how about your office?
15 to 24 per provider per day. That's
Oh,
doctors, PAs.
you Wisconsin folks have it right. You have a real life.
yeah,
It can still, you still want to spend more time with your patients. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, yeah.
for sure.
Hopefully that's where that.
I still think that nurses play that role, a huge role in that. The doctors will go in, and then when you go in to discharge them or whatever the case may be, I make it a point, because I know the doctors sometimes use big words, and I try to bring that down. And they appreciate that so much. They're like, oh, thank you for explaining that, because, sometimes they just get rushed and they feel rushed. But when you start explaining it in a different way, I still think that's key. So,
yeah,
I think, especially the procedures that are done in the room with, somebody taking care of you. I think that when it's a human being, you feel like this person certainly has to have empathy towards me. But if it's a machine, it doesn't care. It's just there to do a job. So even if it sounds empathetic, it's still a cold, machine. So
yeah,
maybe we'll be around for a while.
Another interesting thing that I'm seeing, so we've got my chart that we're using, which is wonderful in a lot of ways, but there's also times where as a provider, if you're a doctor, nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, or a nurse in the clinic, those responding to those my chart messages can be very time consuming. I heard some offices are starting to bill for those, but then, we're sort of creeping into this, we're spending so much time doing responding to these questions and these things through electronic means.
You know what? And at some point, we were just talking about this the other day about my chart, how you can go back and forth and you're spending more time. Pick up a phone and call that patient, because number one, you can't really see their emotion through those my chart messages. You don't know exactly what, and sometimes it's just easier to make a 5-minute phone call than to go back and forth a whole day, because you're going back and playing back and forth. So
I think that's where telehealth is going to start to replace. It's going to be, patients aren't going to be texting back and forth. They're going to get on with a provider where they can actually be billed. And discuss things, because you're right. Patients don't want to come into the office. They don't like it any more than we, like it, having to go for a visit. Right. And they aren't always getting their needs met because it's so fast. You're in and out. So they forget stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So Monica said, go ahead. I was just, since Monica has a couple of things she wanted to say. She said, thank you, Vic. Really interesting presentation. She total each a day 20 to 30, which includes nurse visits and procedures. Provider visits are another 30 to 60. Additionally, many providers have telehealth days, which is great because we don't have the space for those office visits, and they are much faster. Yeah, it's definitely changing. Some good, some bad. We'll time will tell. I think it's going to be, a lot of it's going to be what we as the consumers of healthcare are going to be able to put up with too. We'll somewhat drive it, that's for sure. Yep. All right. Well, it's been a very interesting conversation. Thanks for joining me. I got just a quick note about next week. We're going to be getting together with Dr. Landon Trost, who's going to be talking about penile traction from gimmick to legitimate therapy. So we're going to find out, is this all, this is for the treatment of Peyronie's disease. So it'll be pretty interesting, because this is a different option for patients to try to correct this. So that picture looked torturous. Give me a toy to play with, and I'll come up with a decent picture. So I'm trying to think, what kind of traction could I come up with that would give the impression of what we're talking about. So that was it. All righty. For those of you that are joining in a half hour for the Euro Patient podcast, we'll see you on the Euro Patient podcast. Otherwise, everybody have a great rest of your weekend. I'm going to go hit the swimming pool pretty soon. Enjoy your weather. Everybody next week. Bye.